Corn, that great American grain. Fields of corn. I'm going to tell you a couple things about corn that you might not know. Did you know that 1 acre of corn can pull 8 tons of carbon dioxide out of the air in a season? 8 tons. Did you know that 1 acre of corn with these beautiful broad leaves, look at that, beautiful, beautiful broad leaves. Look at that. Look at these broad leaves. Produces enough oxygen in a season for 131 people to breathe for a year. 1 acre of corn produces enough oxygen in a season for 131 people to breathe for a year. That means that 11.78 billion primates, large primates like humans, on the earth could breathe for a year from 90 million acres of corn that are grown in the United States. The United States grows 90 million plus or minus acres of corn, depending upon what is being used for what products. 90 million acres of corn are produced in the great Midwest per year. 90 million acres of corn are grown in the great Midwest in a year. Those 90 million acres of corn produce enough oxygen for 11.78 billion humans to breathe for a year. Well, you're saying, well, there's not 11.78 billion humans on the earth. No, but there are other primates, there are other animals, and they all breathe this extra oxygen. Let me tell you a little bit something about this corn. If it wasn't for the animals, the livestock and dairy cows, we wouldn't be growing 60% of this corn. 60% of it goes for feed corn. That's about 54 million acres is owing to feed corn. 2/3 of the oxygen produced by corn, I'm saying. 2/3 of the carbon dioxide scrubbed out of the air by corn is a result of feed corn. We have feed corn because we feed dairy cattle, we feed beef cattle. We are the corn producer of the world. In fact, we produce enough corn here not only to feed our cattle, not only to create ethanol, not only to create other products, and not only to provide for distillation of alcohols and many other products, but we produce enough corn in addition to that to make up for the world's shortfall in grain. So we don't have to take our grain and say, well, we need to grow more, or we need to stop giving it whatever to make up for the world's shortfall. We produce enough grain in the heartland to make up for the world's shortfall. If the world isn't getting it, there's political reasons, such as in Venezuela, when we sent in truckloads of food during their crisis, which they're still having, and the trucks were just dumped over and set on fire by the socialist governments that didn't want their people to get it. Had nothing to do with there not being enough corn. Plenty of food here, plenty of grain grown in the United States. What a lot of people don't realize is that it takes 15 pounds of grain to make 1 pound of beef. Wow. Well, what does that mean? That means that if you decide you're going to buy a pound of veggie burgers, take them home and eat them, you haven't helped the farmer, the grain farmer, because if he had bought a pound of beef, the grain farmer would have sold 15 pounds of grain. It takes 15 pounds of grain to make 1 pound of beef. If you're eating 1 pound of grain, you've robbed him of selling 14 pounds of grain. Okay? But I will venture to say that there are not enough cow farts on the planet to get rid of the air purifying, air cleaning, and oxygen providing effects of just corn. We're not talking about soybeans or anything else. Well, let's say we just stop having dairy cows, stop eating beef. Are we going to help to clean the air? Well, what cleans methane out of the air? It's a process known as oxidation. And in order to have oxidation, you've got to have, you guessed it, oxygen. One of the biggest producers of oxygen on the planet are 90 million acres of corn. In order to clean methane, you got to have oxygen. If you don't have cows, if you stop eating beef, eventually the need for 54 million of these acres of corn will vanish. It will hurt companies like Caterpillar of Peoria, Illinois, John Deere. It'll hurt the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, where corn is sold, where hog bellies are sold, where cattle are sold. It will hurt the entire Midwest. It'll hurt the truckers that truck and ship the corn and the beef. Not only is this a money thing, it will hurt the planet in terms of the oxygen that the planet gets from our corn. Those statistics I gave you, about 8 tons of carbon dioxide being scrubbed out of the air from 1 acre of corn, are USDA statistics. Those statistics I gave you, 1 acre of corn providing enough oxygen for 131 people to breathe for a year, those are USDA statistics. 131 people can breathe for 1 year from 1 acre of corn's oxygen. USDA statistics. So, I'm not saying that the desire to get rid of greenhouse gases isn't well-meaning. But the problem is so many well-meaning, well-intentioned ideas like the Green Deal are not well thought out. Let's say, for example, we stop eating beef here and stop growing 54 million acres of feed corn and stop pumping that oxygen into the air. So what happens to the world's quest for protein? Because human beings can't just eat grain. We'll become the cattle. Human beings have a quest for protein, as do most mammals. So the oceans will become overfished. And countries like Argentina, also very large producers of beef, will see a great opportunity. The United States is no longer being the world's beef producer. Argentina and other countries will soon fill in the gaps and become the world's largest beef producers. So will there be less cow farts going up into the oxygen? No. They'll just be farting from different places on the planet. They'll be farting from Argentina, or maybe Canada, or maybe Mexico, or maybe Brazil and Bolivia. But they will still be farting up into the air. And we will no longer have 54 million acres of feed corn cleansing the oxygen anymore, providing the oxygen for the oxygenation that cleans methane out of the air, providing the oxygen that people need to breathe in a year. We'll have destroyed that. Now think about something. When corn is used to make whiskey, goes in a still, and the still produces noxious gases. When corn is used to feed cattle, it produces noxious gases. If this same corn were to rot on a hillside, it produces noxious gases. If you decide not to eat beef, and we don't grow all this corn anymore, and we just let the ground go fallow, and switchgrass and other grasses and ragweed grow up, they too will die into the earth and produce noxious gases. methane, carbon dioxide, and other noxious gases. The production of the noxious gases is a part of the cycle of the herbage. It is a part of the cycle of the verdure, of the greenery. It is not something that is owing strictly to a still or a cow. Again, if you were to take a marble and put it in a copper still, it's not going to produce any gas or alcohol. If you were to take a marble and put it in the cow's stomach, it's not going to produce any gases, nor is it going to nourish the cow. If you put the corn and you use the corn to make mash, and that is what powers the still, yes, there will be noxious gases. If you use the corn to feed the cow, yes, there will be noxious gases. If the corn sits on a hillside and rots, there will be noxious gases. And if the corn isn't grown and grasses grow instead and they rot, they will produce noxious gases. So you say to yourself, well, we could take all this extra corn and we could just feed the planet. Well, here's the problem with that. First of all, we already produce enough extra corn to make up for the world's shortfall. So that's not necessary. Secondly, if you were to take 54 million acres of corn grown here and not give it to cattle and suddenly decide you're going to feed the world with it, you will cause such a huge glut on the world's grain market that you will destroy the economies of many nations. While ideas like the Green Deal are well-intentioned, as are many environmentalistic ideas, they oftentimes are not well thought out at all, particularly with their environmental consequences. I'll give you another example. Back a number of years ago, there were environmentalists who wanted to get all the oil wells off the ground. They leak, they cause environmental problems, put them out to the sea. So Bill Clinton signed something known as the No Royalties Act, which means that oil companies didn't have to pay the United States government royalties for putting their derricks and their spars out in the Gulf. It was meant to appease environmentalists who wanted the oil drilling off the land. So it went out to the sea. Not that anybody asked the sea life, the intelligent sea life, if they cared about this. But that was to Bill Clinton signed the No Royalties Act to please the environmentalists. Well, we all know what the result was. If anybody follows several of the oil spills, including the horrendous one, we all know what the result was. If anybody follows the oil spills, including that horrendous one with the deep seas horizon,